Good morning, all. On the latest episode of the Turn It Round the Corner podcast, I'm with Arron Benstead, who is Head of Medical at Chelmsford City in the Conference South and is the owner of Back to Best Injury and Rehab Clinic in Southend. So we're at his lovely premises today. Benno, how you doing?
Very well, thanks, Christian. How are you?
Yeah, good mate, good mate. Enjoy your weekend?
Yeah, it was very nice, thank you.
Yeah, good win on Saturday?
Very nice win, yeah. It's three wins on the bounce in the league now and one in the FA Cup. So yeah, we've won 4 on the bounce. So it's nice to turn around a few of the losses into victories.
So we'll start with, your current role in football. So let's talk about this facility here. So Back to Best, how long has this been going? How long have you been the owner? Obviously, I know you changed premises. It's a lovely place that you got here now. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do and how you assist footballers on their rehab and maybe looking at injuries at the first instance?
Yeah. So we set the business up in 2013. Initially started in a room at the back of my house. Was really lucky. Within a few months, I'd got in with a local running club and I had enough clients to kind of have a sustainable business.
Yeah.
So we quickly transitioned to a premises in Rochford, and in 2020 we then moved to a larger premises where we're able to add a gym into the facility, so we can obviously do a lot more rehab-based treatments. And then in 2022 we moved to the current premises, and now we've got 4 treatment rooms. We've got a fully kitted out gym. We offer lots of like sports science-based testing. We pretty much cover most injuries from youngsters up to adults. People playing sport, people not playing sport. We cover pretty much everything really. So
do you look after people in their everyday life, sort of what you'd call that prehab now as well, or is it more, someone's got an injury, they come and see you, and then you might build them back up to full fitness, or what?
Yeah, we have a complete mixture. So you'll have your people come in who have sustained like acute injuries. So they'll come in, we'll treat them, we'll get them back doing whatever sport they're in. It may well be that they've come from sport, or it might be something such as someone's hurt their shoulder and can't pick a can of beans out the cupboard. So we'll rehab that and get them back, doing what they want to do pain-free. Some of them patients then become sort of regular, ongoing patients. I don't like the word maintenance, but they kind of come in for a bit of regular treatment, little checkups, to treat any niggles and sort of continue along the way, or other things they pick up, just to try and keep them as pain-free as possible.
Okay. And plans for the future for this?
So I'd love to. We've got 4 treatment rooms now, so I'd love to add to our treatment rooms. Obviously, space permitting, so we'd have to increase the upstairs floor, and then have a bigger team of therapists. We've got myself and 2 others in here at the moment. And then we've got a counselling company that also use the rooms off for us, as well as like a couple of strength and conditioning coaches. But the aim would be to increase the amount of rooms we've got. And, potentially what I am looking at doing is setting up a specific football rehab centre.
Okay.
But that would run alongside what we're doing here. But that's sort of that's a little bit in the pipeline at the minute. And I'm hoping that by the end of this year, we've kind of done something or moved towards having that facility set up as well.
You touched on something there, I didn't even know you did that, the counselling side of things. Obviously, modern society is a lot of pressure on not just people who play sport, but just everyday life. Do you want to touch on that a little bit about what the sort of services they offer?
Yeah, I think they offer anything from, they offer counselling services from anyone with chronic pain, long-term injuries, because obviously naturally that we know that pain isn't just driven through injury, that a lot of biosocial kind of effects cause pain, like anxiety, depression. People might have had a bereavement. So I just thought it was when he approached us and said, did we have any space available? I thought it was a brilliant addition to add to the clinic.
Definitely.
It just offers the more of a holistic approach. So naturally within house, we can say to a patient, that kind of for example, your lower back pain, there actually isn't structurally too much going on. But all of these other factors in your life, we need to manage those better. And if I'm perfectly honest, as a physio, I'm not qualified to deal with that. So by having those guys in-house, we can literally knock on the next door, send them in there, and it's a natural transition and a nice flow between practitioners, really.
So people that are probably sat on their bum listening to this podcast, what are 3 or 4 tips that people can do in their everyday life just to live out active?
I think, easy walking's free. I think getting out the front, outside the door, going for walks, an easy option to do. If someone's a little bit more maybe mobile and enjoys sport, then going for a light jog. Hydration's really important. Good nutrition, so getting on board decent amounts of protein, carbs, fats. and rest as well. You know, a lot of people I think that I'm seeing in, you know, modern day life and around, you know, the injuries that present in clinic, that people are doing so much. And a lot of people don't appreciate that, you know, your recovery and your rest and where you grow, or where you grow is when you're recovering. So yeah, you know, lots of regular movement, you know, not sitting static for long periods of time, decent hydration, decent nutrition, but also appreciate your, you know, your rest and try and get plenty of sleep.
I know people are fascinated by like step counts and everything these days. What numbers you got? What would you say to people if you can get out and do X amount of steps a day?
So I think obviously if you look around the kind of the fitness market, 10,000 steps is the number that's banded around.
Yeah.
And, you know, I myself I try and do 10,000 steps a day, but it's not always achievable.
Sure.
You know, I think as a number, I think that if you were finding it was difficult to get out and achieve, say, 5,000 steps, start at 2,000 steps. And all I'd say was just try and build it up,
Yeah.
you know, and it might not be that, you know, you might be that really limited for time. So you know, a lot of people are quite time poor. So maybe split that up over a couple of times through the day. It doesn't have to be you go out and do 5,000 steps at once. You know, you
Sure.
might do 2,000 in the morning, 2,000 in the afternoon, and then get out for 1,000 steps later on in the day. So, you know, but again, it's gradually building that in.
Love that, mate. And then talking about, I suppose, your part-time job, but we all know in football, you're laughing now, we all know that, you know, non-league football is not a part-time job at all. I'd say it's probably even more so and more of a commitment than your full-time job. So head of medical at Chelmsford City.
Yep, been doing that job. I'm in my second season with the club now. Yeah, thoroughly enjoy it. But it's a lot of commitment and a lot of time, because as you say, you know, you're not just dealing with players when you're at training. It's pretty much every, even this morning before coming to clinic at 7 a.m. I'm designing rehab plans for players to sort of do this week or to progress their rehab whilst we're not in contact with them, just to make sure we're always creating some progression. So when we get into training the session this week, you know, we've done something else, and then we've got some markers that we can move towards and try and progress them slightly.
Brilliant. So we'll come back to that in due course. So Benno, obviously I know you from locally. I suppose at the end of your career you play for Lee Ramblers, but talk to me about how you got into football. What was your first team? Was that locally here or?
So from Cambridge. So I was born in Cambridge, and I played from 4 years old for a team called Cherry Hinton Lions. Just as a goalkeeper. I think my dad played in goal, so as long as I can remember, or as far back as I know, I can remember standing between two tree stumps over the local school with my dad hitting these shots at me that looked like a banana, with him hammering me, saying like, "Why aren't you saving them?"
So did your dad play at a good level, or?
He played with Cambridge United, but only sort of up to like youth team level. And then I think as soon as he had a son, I think no matter what I wanted to do, I was becoming a goalkeeper. And it started with those. And
did you ever have any aspirations to play out on pitch, or was it just you're playing in goal, son? And
so when I was in secondary school, I was probably as good on pitch as I was in goal.
Right.
But I probably had more opportunity for me as a goalkeeper, just because you know the clubs that I had in contact, I was in contact with. But yeah, I probably got to about year 11, and I just decided that I think that goalkeeping was the way I was going to go. But yeah, there was a point where, and I probably, if it wasn't for my dad, I may well have him kind of pushing me and making me be a goalkeeper. I may well have ended up being I love being in centre midfield.
Sure. Well, what they say, what's the sentence they always say, that the person in goal always wants to play out right. They've always got it in the back of their mind. So you started playing locally, as everyone does. How did that then progress to? So you went in. You was at Peterborough as a young age. Was that the first club, or Cambridge?
Yeah. So I went through. So about sort of like under 12s, under 11s. I represented Cambridge District, Cambridge Schools, East Anglia. I then signed to Ipswich Town from, I think, probably around 11 or 12 till about 14, 15. Got let go by them, had a little bit of time, a couple of clubs. So just trialled with Cambridge United. I was at Millwall, Crystal Palace. Then I went to Peterborough at 16, got offered a scholarship with Peterborough, and then spent sort of a couple of years with them. And then, unfortunately, got to 18. I was probably up fourth on the pecking order with regards to the pro keepers. Yeah. I got offered a deal, but I thought, So
you got offered a pro deal after your YT,
Yeah, I got offered a year's deal, but I looked at it and kind of thought, am I going to get a year then just be farmed out? Because I said I wouldn't have ever got first team football. So at that point I came back to Cambridge, played for Cambridge City as well, and then sort of I've never obviously made it as a pro footballer.
So talk to me about Peterborough. So your YTS days at Peterborough. Who was in that So what year was your YTS? Can you remember?
Oh, that's going back some years. So I would probably say around 98, I think it would have.
Okay.
Yeah, about 98 to probably 2000. Yeah.
So who was? Can you remember any boys from your youth team that kicked on and had a career?
So Matty Everington, he was already in the first team when I went there, but he was a
So
scholar.
Simon Davis as well. Yeah.
And they were about the only two from Peterborough, and then none of the boys in our actual group ended up, a couple of them got year deals, but none of them went on for like a full-term career really.
Okay. And who was the manager then?
Adi Boothroyd.
A first team manager.
He was, yeah. He was a youth team manager.
He was a youth team manager.
And then Barry Fry was first team manager, yeah.
So look, like obviously Adi Boothroyd's gone on, he's managing the under 21s, had a sort of a wide career. Would you have said, obviously after his playing career, would you have said he'd had the career that he'd had? Was he a good coach? How was he with the young kids?
He was really good. He was really strong. So it was like things like when I first went there, I'd have to get the train from Cambridge to Peterborough.
Okay.
Whereas my dad wanted to drive me. He said, no, he's got to get the train. He's picked me up get from Peterborough train station to the training ground to get on the minibus.
Yeah.
And then he dropped me back at sort of 10:30 at night to get the last train back to Cambridge waiting for me. And it was like, if he misses it, he's got to learn his own way of kind of standing on his own 2 feet. So yeah, he was harsh, but...
Do you think that was looking back now, do you think that was a good thing or...
Yeah, 100%. Because I think it makes you stand on, first time you're on the train by yourself, coming from Peterborough to Cambridge at 10:30 at night.
How long did that take?
Only probably about 40 minutes.
Right, but still far enough.
Yeah, it's all the different people on the train, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think that stood you in good stead because it made you stand up your own 2 feet a little bit. And then, I say from there on in, it didn't become an issue. But I was doing that, I think, 2-3 times a week before I got offered a deal.
Can you remember what jobs you had as a YT?
Boots. I had to clean. I think the worst boots I had to clean was Ian Ashby's at Cambridge United.
Right.
Because I remember one Christmas cleaning when I was on trial with them.
Yeah.
Cleaned his boots. I go back into the away changing room. I get a call, Azza. I'm like, what's he want now? So I go back in there and he sort of said, what have you done? You haven't cleaned my boots. And so I said, I have cleaned them. He said, no, you haven't. And they're covered in mud. He's been outside, rubbed them in. They did it 3 times for me. But he gave me £200 bonus because he was also my neighbour where I lived as well. So I think he did it deliberately just to try and get at me.
Did you have to sing for your bonus, or did you have to do any? Back in the day, you normally had to put on a show or sing or do anything for your bonus.
Just the usual sing song.
Yeah. So you've during that YTS period, 16 to 18. Was there any reserve team football? Did you get any exposure to that, or was it purely just youth team football?
Youth team football, yeah. Just being loaned out to some sort of senior clubs, like what would now be equivalent to sort of step 4, step 5.
Where did you go? Is there anywhere you can remember?
I went to Cambridge City.
Yeah.
I actually ended up went to Harrogate Town for a little bit.
Okay.
Harrogate
Town. I was in up north. Harrogate Town.
Yeah, Leeds,
That's a bold loan move at that age, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was, and I think that's probably one reason why. Well, I ended up actually going up there to go to uni as well. So that's probably what it worked that way also. But it was a fair trek for me.
Yeah, nice part of the world. So, can you remember the day that you was released? Did you see it coming? Was it a shock? Obviously, they've half offered you a deal, but you're saying I suppose in essence you didn't get released because you turned it down. What was your thinking then? Did you think that you can go and make it somewhere else, or you just didn't want to have a career where you might not actually get the chance to play first team football?
Yeah, I think because I wasn't going to make it where I was.
Who were the first team keepers then at that point?
Mark Tyler was the first choice goalkeeper. And there was an Irish under 23. I can't remember the name. He was on a 21 international ahead of me.
Okay.
So I was never going to budge them. So I think I knew a few months prior to the actual end date that I wasn't going to continue.
Yeah.
And I then thought, what else can I do? How can I stay in and around sport? What else do I like within football that I could do in addition to playing football?
Sure.
And obviously I'd been on loan to Harrogate Town, so that sort of helped my decision making because I knew I could get a deal with them. I just looked around it and thought, so it didn't come as a shock because I built myself up for it. Sure. But it just meant I had to knuckle down at college because obviously as many YT boys don't really, the school side of it, you kind of just use it as on the side burner.
A DOS day, yeah.
Absolutely.
Wednesday DOS day, yeah. So you finished there at 18 and then talk to me about you know, how you approach. So did you say you had any trials, or was it right? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go off and do my education.
Yeah, I literally stopped, went and signed for Harrogate Town, and then went off to. I luckily scraped through enough grades in a BTEC to get through clearing at Leeds University.
Okay.
And then I thought, you know what, if I've got to deal with Harrogate,
Yeah.
I've got my degree I wanted to get onto at Leeds. I'll go up there, I'll play, and then just see what, just enjoy. Because I probably at the end of it, you lose that bit of enjoyment as well, because your head's turned a bit elsewhere. I just wanted to get back to, I suppose, enjoying and playing some regular football and earning a bit of money.
Also becomes a job, right? I think people sometimes outside of it, there's a lot of talk about they own this, they do that, but I think you get to a point where it just becomes another job, right? And you want to earn the best that you can, and there's also a lot of pressure, and mentally there's a lot for you to take in sport that some people that work 9 to 5 don't have to put up with. So, what league were Harrogate in at that point? Because they had a bit of a rise through non-league, didn't they?
Yeah, Northern Premier.
Okay.
And then into the conference, what would be now the Conference North. Yeah, and I played there for a couple of seasons whilst up there, up in Leeds.
So did you go to study for this industry? You had it from that you wanted to be a physio from early, or was that something that you just something that you thought about doing after you kind of put the football to bed?
Yeah, I actually wanted to be a paramedic.
Okay.
A paramedic or a doctor, and I knew I weren't clever enough to be a doctor. So I then obviously thought, because I was involved in football,
sure.
I liked the medical side of it. I thought, what can I do? What else is involved in? I didn't want to become a coach, and that's obviously then that led me down the road, sort of where I went and where I am now, really.
So how long is that course? So if you want to be a physio, how long is that course? And I suppose you spoke about the doctor. How does that compare to being a doctor?
So it's 3 years.
Okay.
Obviously, medical school to become a doctor is 7 years.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, it was 3 years. It included rotations within the hospitals to, in various different areas such as orthopedics, cardiac rehab, intensive care, etc. So yeah, it's full on, and it's a full 3 years. Obviously, how I look back on it now at 18 years old, how I passed, I don't know, because for the first couple of years, you want to live a student life, and you've still got that mentality of you're still playing football. It's difficult, it's hard to focus. But yeah, I in the end, I got enough. I passed, and then sort of, I say, the rest is history from there, I suppose.
Did you? I know you said a couple of years. Did you play football all the way through? And did that little bit of non-league money help you as you're a student? Because still Northern Prem, there's teams in that league that pay very good money.
Yeah, absolutely. So I used my football money to kind of pay my way through.
Yeah.
And then I had a little part-time job in a sports shop as well, just whenever I needed to get a little bit of work around doing my uni stuff. And yeah, I was fortunate that paid me enough to kind of enable me to do the things I wanted to do when I was up at university as well.
Okay. So you've done your 3 years at university, and then talk to me about like sort of next steps after coming out.
So yeah, I actually went into working in the fitness industry as well as working in a clinic at a company called Green's Health and Fitness in Cambridge.
Okay.
And then because when I was coming back from uni, I would obviously work there as like a personal trainer.
Sure.
So I suppose again that's where I forged my love for therapy, for rehab as well, and putting the emphasis of exercise on rehabilitation. So yeah, I worked there for about 3 years, as well as within a clinic and on the gym floor. Okay. I then progressed up the sort of management level. So I actually become a leisure manager within the club. Okay. So I looked after all the gym staff, all the leisure staff, and then moved into full-time clinic work, working for someone else, and then eventually kind of ended up doing my own thing.
Sure. So you've come out, and obviously you've gone to work for a clinic. That's probably given you a lot of exposure to different parts of the business to allow you to run your business, but at the same time give you new skills. Had you put football to bed by then, or was you still playing non-league? Or
yes, I was still playing. I didn't really. I think I had about probably 6 months down at uni, just in my third year, when I need to concentrate on dissertation, etc. But yeah, I played throughout. I played at various different clubs, mainly around the Cambridge area, because that's where I was living. But yeah, I kind of didn't ever stop playing. Right. I think every time you stop, it's such an important part of I suppose life growing up, and it was an important part of my life from 4 years old, and it's probably why even when I've stopped playing that I've remained involved in it. because it's kind of things where it's difficult to kind of think what you do without it. So
No,
yeah, I always
100%.
wanted to play, and you know, I was fortunate enough to play throughout that period at a half decent level. But yeah, I always did that around work as well.
Did you like? Funny question, maybe, but when you're playing non-league, for instance, I would say some clubs have really good physios, some are questionable, so to speak. Is there any point when you're thinking, like when you're playing non-league, you know, this is a shambles. I could do this a little bit better, or I'd do that different. Like, cause it's hard. Like, I'd say now because of the money. Sometimes, obviously, football clubs are going to spend all their money on players, aren't they?
Yeah.
So sometimes the physio, depending what level you're in, obviously, but sometimes that physio rehab bit can be sort of an afterthought. So you might get people on work experience, you might get old boys that are at the end just for a bit of pocket money. So how did you find that you've been studying, you're in that industry, you're still playing, but at the same time you could have like, I don't know, an 80-year-old bloke running the bag. Like, was that something that you thought actually that I could do this myself?
So honestly, through all the years of probably playing
Yeah.
kind of like senior football from 18 up to probably 35,
Yeah.
I had one physio who I actually
Right.
did some work experience with called
Okay.
Greg Reed, who was become head of medical at Cambridge United.
Okay. So
Absolutely,
you got lucky then.
absolutely brilliant. But the rest of them, you know, were,
Yeah.
without being rude, weren't great.
Sure.
But yeah, he was the one, and he kind of inspired me to go on and want to do more.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of the time I wouldn't go to the physio.
No.
I'd kind of, you know, think I can do it. I could see it myself. And touch
Yeah.
wood, I wasn't a player that got a lot of injuries. You know, being in goal, I got the odd, obviously, impact injury and that sort of thing. Yeah. But yeah, most of the physios I probably wouldn't have gone and seen.
So during that time, before we go on to like the full-time football physio stuff, what was any highlights of playing non-league?
So I was actually at Farnborough when we drew Arsenal in the third round of the FA Cup.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I broke 4 ribs in, I think it was up 4 weeks before playing for the reserves. So, you know, we had to get a lone goalkeeper into play. I couldn't be part of it. That was a highlight.
Is that when Wesley was in charge of Farnborough? Was he?
Yeah.
Yeah. I bet, how was he?
Mad.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was as mad as Martin Allen, I think. But yeah, he was mad. And then I suppose around that, you know, playing for Haverhill Rovers, we got to the 4th qualifying round of the FA Cup. You know, the furthest the club's ever got. You know, I think I remember driving into the ground that day, and you know, people queuing up all around the road. The kickoff was delayed. We had Aldershot Town, and you know, we lost 4-0. But I suppose that would have been a huge highlight because, you know, as a group of lads who were brilliant, and to get to that level of I think at the time it was probably step 6, step 7 football.
Okay.
But to get to kind of the 4th qualifier was an amazing achievement. So that's definitely, you know, I was looking back on it, a definite highlight. And when that memory comes up every year on social media, it's always one I share because one, I had brilliant hair then, and secondly, I think it was a massive achievement from us all, really.
And you touched on it a couple of times, and obviously been a Cambridge boy. What was did you have any sort of experience or sort of, you know, playing? So was there any chance that you could play for Cambridge? I know we've spoken about it before. There was a few chances where, you know, you could have gone back to Cambridge and played. Do you want to talk through that a little bit?
Yes, I played with Cambridge City for a good few years.
Yeah.
Jez George was.
What league were they, mate?
So they were
Southern
Premier, if I remember correctly. Jez George was the youth team manager. Then was Chris Toovey, I believe, was the first team manager.
Okay.
And then, not long after leaving uni, I went and trained with Cambridge United with Jez.
Okay.
And I was, you know, I wasn't far off. I was pretty close then to getting offered something. But I ended up signing for them, but playing for the reserve side, which were kind of made up. They would call it CRC, so Cambridge Regional College. And then within that's when I started shadowing. It come about shadowing Greg Reed, the physio.
Okay.
Jez said, "Oh, look, do you fancy training? You know, we're looking for a keeper." Anyway, I ended up playing for the reserve team week in, week out for about a season and a half, and that's when I shadowed like the first team physio in the daytime, just to gain some more experience within a kind of a full-time football setting.
So you say you was close. Who are the first team keepers there at Cambridge?
I can't remember who was first. And Will Norris was there. I'm pretty sure Will was, when he was up and coming, 18-year-old young lad.
Okay.
I can't remember who was the first team goalkeeper at that point, to be honest.
Were all your mates Cambridge fans? Were they all like sort of rooting for you to
So yeah, quite a few of them are Cambridge fans, and I literally from 4 years old. My uncle's a massive Cambridge fan, so from like 4 years old up to kind of 15, I followed Cambridge home and away. We went to pretty much every ground in the country in the in the football league. So yeah, I think he was the person rooting for me the most to get something, probably because he wanted to get a free season ticket.
They've always produced good kids, right? Wasn't it a couple of years ago? Didn't they get to the FA Youth Cup final? Didn't they play Arsenal? I think in the FA Youth Cup final. I think over the last few years they've started to produce kids again. Is that something that is that the first result you look out for on a Saturday? Cambridge, is that a club that's always close to your heart?
Yeah, so Cambridge United and Aston Villa are the two ones I have.
Aston Villa?
Yeah, when I was growing up supporting Cambridge, often in the first or second division, I thought, I need a team in the top league to support. So I was looking for my mum's catalogue, like who could I support? My dad was a Spurs fan, I didn't want to support them.
Okay.
And I literally looked through the catalogue and I thought, I like their kit. And ever since then, that's where I've supported Aston Villa. So yeah, the two results I always look for, like professionally, are always Villas and Cambridge United after we finish our games.
So famous, well not famous, sorry, your favourite ever Cambridge player? Dion Dublin?
Question. Possibly Dion Dublin. He was John Vaughan, the goalkeeper.
Okay.
I love John Sheffield, the goalkeeper. Probably, and again, only because I got to train with him, who I absolutely loved as I got, was Lionel Perez. I'd probably say, if I was pushed on it, Lionel Perez would be my favourite.
He's the crazy one that ended up. Did he end up at Hornchurch when they had the money, didn't he?
I think so, Frenchman. He played at Sunderland.
That's it. Number 33. Yeah, there you go.
And he was amazing to train as a coach as well. Yeah. I loved training with him. But yeah, I'd probably say, just because of how eccentric he was. And I think John Vaughan, John Sheffield, Lionel Perez would be my favourites.
And Villa?
Favourite player for Villa? I'd say now Martinez, the goalkeeper. I just I just think he's brilliant, and I say now, especially off the back of, and he made that save at the end of the World Cup, and I just feel that he's such an underrated goalkeeper for never getting a proper chance at Arsenal. But yeah, I think Martinez would be one of my favourite Villa players.
So we talked about Cambridge and shadowing. How have you stopped playing football and sort of moved into the physio role? Who was your first physio role with?
Yeah, so my first physio role was so around football, playing still. I did a little bit of work at some local non-league clubs, just in the evenings to help them out and what have you. But my first proper role, being employed by a club, was with Royston Town. Okay. That would have been about 6 years ago. But actually, when I went to Royston, I ended up signing as second choice goalkeeper. Okay. So I spent my first 3 or 4 seasons between Royston, Bowers, Concord Rangers as running the medical department, but also being on the team sheet every week as second choice goalkeeper. Did
you ever have to come on?
Twice.
Yeah. Yeah,
and I played a couple of cup games. But yeah, I think I might have got away with one game, but consistently, because not training, I'd have been all over the shop. But yeah, I think Royston was my first one.
That under Steve Castle?
That was under Steve Castle.
So for I suppose during that point, they had a really good side. I remember watching them a few games, like Matty Bateman and people like that up front. Was that the cup run against Concord? That was
it was.
You there then?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I think that year, that we had one hell of a really good side, and I think COVID killed that year for them. And I think if COVID didn't come, I think that Royston were top of the league. I pretty much think they'd have got
that was Southern Prem. Was that Southern Prem?
It was Southern Prem. Yeah. I had a really, really nice club, and working under Steve was brilliant as well.
From that team, I suppose Scott, the skipper is Gus Morris, the fullback at Southend.
Yep,
he was there then.
He was. Yeah.
Was there a few other boys that have kicked on? Wasn't there from that team?
I think Gussie's the only one who's gone, who's full time. A couple of the boys, I think, off the top of my head, probably moved up a league or two, but they've still got a fair, it's still a kind of quite a nucleus of that group. They've got such a nice bond between them, and the club, so I say it's a lovely club to be at. Yeah. That a few of them are still there from when I was there.
Obviously, Steve Castle, big Orient legend. What was he like as a manager?
I love Steve. Yeah. He's you always knew after the game, you knew when he wasn't happy, because he'd stand there and he'd lay out he'd come in and the boys are cooling down, but he'd start folding up the kit on the bench. He'd unfold the kit, he'd fold the kit back up, and I just went in my treatment room and just sort of like sat around the corner because you knew he was going to erupt.
That's to let the temper simmer,
but he was kind of like, he's a bit like Marmite, but he heads and kicked every single football. And I think if he could, he would have put himself out there and played every single game. But I thought he was a brilliant manager, and I thoroughly enjoyed working with him.
Yeah, I like Steve. I think he'd be in most Dorian supporters probably all time 11. So how did that opportunity arise to go to Royston? And then how would you say that you sort of grew into the role? Because we'll get onto it, but a physio now, it's not, we made a joke earlier about, an old guy running on with a bag. It's so much more than that now, right? So how did you have to take extra once you decided I'm going to do this properly? Was there other qualifications you need to take? Is there tell me about what other, what surrounds that now to be a physio?
So I think my initially going to Royston come about because they had a girl who was doing it and she was leaving. My best mate, Scotty Taylor, who's a strength and conditioning coach there. Right. So he just said to me, look, do you fancy coming over? Went to have a chat with Steve. And then, it was kind of like a bit of a no-brainer for me. That I thought it was about time to maybe hang up my gloves, my goalie gloves, and put on my medical gloves. With regards to qualification, so you should have a pitch-side trauma qualification. Sure. At different levels of the game, there's a different, should we say the FA set a different criteria. Yeah. The lower the level, obviously, the less they demand of the therapist. Sure. But yeah, so I went and got my pitch-side trauma qualification. And then from there on in, I was, fully qualified, ready to go to deliver pitch-side first aid as such, as well as the treatment that you'd have, at training and off the pitch. Okay.
So you started at Royston. So you had how long there?
So I was at Royston for a season, a season and a half, sorry. Then I left just to go more local, just because obviously with, the private business growing and what have you, it was just hard to travel, a lot of travel.
Big travel in the Southern Leagues, right?
Yeah, and it was 2 hours for me to get the bus. So just for an away game, it's that 2 hours just to get the bus, and often another 2 hours from there. So I was often getting home, pretty late at night. I was looking at some other studying as well. So I was there for a season and a half initially. I went away to another club, and then I did come back for another season as well.
Right. But when you're talking about obviously travel, now we're talking, you've moved from Cambridge. When did you move locally to the Southend area?
So I moved down to Southend in, would have been about 16, 17 years ago. Okay. Again, what brought us down to the Southend area was I was a bit kind of, I suppose I wasn't enjoying the clinic I was working in so much. Right. My best mate was working in a gym, didn't want to do that anymore. And we had the opportunity to buy a sports coaching franchise. Okay. So we bought it, and it was the Essex area that it covered. Scott was living in Chelmsford. So I thought, let's give it a go. And I carried on working part-time in the clinic in Cambridge. Okay. We lived with Scott in Chelmsford, and that kind of then brought me down this way. I always wanted to set up my own practice. And Scott left pretty quickly on with having that business. He got an opportunity actually at Peterborough as full-time S&C coach under Darren Ferguson. So he did that. So I was left this business by myself, plus working in a clinic. We built it up, and I sold that business 6 years ago. Right. It was really hard trying to. We had managers and what have you in it, but it was just hard keeping on top of that, as well as like a full-time clinic caseload. And I said, when I knew I wanted to then get into football, I thought I can't do football, have that business, and run a clinic. So I sold that one 6 years ago. But that's what brought me down to Essex originally.
So you left Royston. Did you go Concord, or was it Bowers? Where'd you go from there?
I went to Bowers under Rob Small. Okay. Then when Smallsy left there, I went. Royston asked me to go back. So I went. Again, I enjoyed it there so much. So I thought, I'll go back. And then Rob got the job at Concord. Yeah. And again, just because it was more local, and to be honest, I wanted to work at a higher level. I wanted to try and work at the highest level.
Conference South then. Were they in Conference South?
They were in the Conference South, yeah. He took over at a really tough time. The club hadn't won hardly any games. We were down the bottom, and I think he went in there, got a couple of good results, and we went for a really bad patch. Yeah, it's strange because obviously when you're down the bottom of the league, I think the mentality of the player, it's easier to be injured because some
Of
of the
course
games
it
are so
is.
important. So you have a lot of players with, with these injuries that, I'm not saying weren't injuries, but, maybe not injuries if you're at the top of the league that keep you out of games.
Sure.
And then we went on an unbelievable run where we were playing 3 times a week, sometimes 4 times a week. And if I'm honest, a second to last game, the boys just ran out of steam. I think the amount of games caught up on them. But I think if we'd have had another 3 weeks of the season and could have spread the games out, I think Rob would have kept them in the league.
And so then, obviously, they're going down to the Roman Premier. Is that when Smallsy left? Did he leave then?
Yeah, so Smallsy left at the end of that season, and sort of then all of the backroom staff went as well.
And where did you go from there, mate?
Chelmsford.
Okay.
So Adam Drew rung me up in the. I always joked about him, and when we saw that
he was involved with Concord for a long time, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. And whenever we played him, I always joked with Drew. I was like, so when am I going to come to Chelmsford? And there's a chap called Dave Lawson who I work with now at Chelmsford, and he's an older chap and has been around the game for a long time. And whenever we played him, I always thought, what a lovely guy he'd be to work with. So ironically, Concord went down, all of the staff left, and Ad rang me up and said, look, our physio's going. Do you fancy coming over? And I agreed to.
So head of medical, talk to me about. So how are you someone then that heads up obviously the team? Does that include strength and conditioning? Is that the physio unit? Talk to me about your current role then at Chelmsford.
Yeah, so I look after the team of therapists that we've got.
Okay.
We don't have a S&C coach. We kind of have to. We do that within the kind of the physio as I suppose role.
Yeah.
But I look after the training sessions, providing provision for the training sessions, which is 4 times a week. I provide obviously all of the we provide all the medical provision at matches.
Yeah.
We have to then look after all of the stocks, making sure everything's in place for the players. Match day days, obviously it's providing pitch side care, running on the pitch like you see the physios on telly, and then day to day wise, you've got your training sessions, you've got your assessment, your treatment, your rehab, and then when you're not at training, there's often a lot of contact with players, following up from if they've had a knock at the weekend or a midweek game, putting in place some rehab plans for them. So what I try not to do is if a player's had an injury on a Saturday, is leave them till like a Tuesday sort of to start their rehab, because obviously we know from all of the research around the management of injuries that the earlier we can start intervening, the quicker we can get in recovery. And so quite often from the initial injury, within sort of 30 seconds or a minute of the injury happening, I'm with the player. And obviously if they're coming off the pitch, we're straight away putting things in place to try and limit bleeding, limit swelling, maintain movement, so we can try and get them back on the pitch as quickly as possible.
So talk to me. Obviously, I've always looked at Chelmsford as a big non-league club. I think everyone does that, especially obviously when they're doing well. You get big crowds. Obviously, there's the push for the Conference National. So, is this the first year? I suppose people call it the hybrid system. Is this the first year that you're trialing that hybrid system? And if so, what are the commitments around on time for players and that?
Yeah, so it is. So normally, last year it was Tuesday, Thursday nights training.
Yeah.
This year it's Tuesday, Thursday nights training, and then obviously an optional for the players on a Monday and a Friday morning.
Okay.
The evening training, is a couple of hours, and then the morning sessions are between an hour and a half and 2 hours each. The sessions in the morning are gradually building over pre-season. They were quite busy, and it's quite nice. It works around players' work, but you're getting a fair few training. Will they transition possibly to full time? I think that probably I'm not the person to kind of answer the question, but I think that the transition eventually would be that the club would love to obviously get into the National League Prem, and I think they would potentially become a full time outfit.
Because I look at the should we say the Conference South as like a real what league to go and look at, because obviously now the Conference National is more or less the 5th league, right? Take out 1 or 2 teams, everyone's full time. There's big teams in it, good money in it. Obviously, you have a handful of teams that might be doing this hybrid system in the Conference South, but it's normally a level where, say, you come out of full time football as a 19-year-old, it's a very good window, isn't it, to go and get yourself looked at, play games, and see if you can go back up the ladder. So, your squad right now, what would you see? How does that comprise? Would you say of younger boys wanting to get back into full time, or what's the split? Would you say of of then older boys that maybe know in their head they're not going to get back into full-time football and are working? What would you say the split of the squad is?
I think the average age of our squad is about 22. So
That's
I think
great.
that a lot of the boys, Simo, the manager, said the other day that
Yeah.
the same side that went out Saturday would also be potentially could pretty much be the same side that was representing the under 23s. So it's a really young side, and if you look at last season's squad, quite a few of the boys have gone back into full-time football. Some of them are a little bit older, have gone to other clubs, and
Sure.
I think this season, I think that the way Chelmsford is and the way the club's set up and the type of football that they play and the type of player that they sign, I wouldn't be surprised if more players in the current squad at the end of this season kick on as well. And as much as I suppose you always want to hang on to your best players, but I suppose there's a realisation as a part-time club that
100%.
you're going to build a strong team, particularly with youngsters. And when you're kicking on and you're doing well, every game you've got a multitude of scouts there, and they've all got agents, and they're probably using it as a stepping stone to kind of go full time. Really,
I think you touched on it now. I think as frustrating as it can be, I think it also. I was having this conversation. You was there Saturday night with Scopesy at his party. I think in the Conference South, you've also as well got to try and sell it that it is that shop window for people to get back in. Like, it is very frustrating. Obviously, as a part-time team, you're not going to pay the wages that a full-time team pays if they want to progress. But that league definitely gives them a good standard of football in front of good followings to showcase their skills and then obviously move back up the ladder. So you touched on a little bit. Then how has that role changed now? Because when you spoke about your responsibilities and what you have to do, that is a lot. And obviously, physio over the years and the requirements and everything that you need to do, that's massively changed. So how do you manage that? How many in your team? How do you set your sort of time commitments to run this business and do that as well?
So I think that you're right. The role of a physio in a football club has massively changed from the man running on with a cold splunge. To if you the demands now, like pitch side, we need to be trained in delivery of oxygen. Entonox. We can splint fractures. We can manage spinal injuries. We can potentially, not you'd ever want to do it. We can tube airways. And that's something that has hugely evolved. So I think where the FA have put kind of, I suppose, more in place with regards to the provision that's needed and the professionalism and the qualifications of those therapists that are providing that. So, the role of it, is, I suppose it's a lot more advanced than it used to be. You're pretty much providing pre-hospital care. So, you have paramedics sometimes at some of your games and doctors, but you're pretty much providing pre-hospital care to players to maintain, I suppose, health and life until an ambulance turns up, and sometimes that can be a long time. So you have to be well qualified in it. With regards to kind of like our team, we've got a team of we've got a couple of therapists who are sort of like always with the club, and then we've got a couple of students. We provide placements to our students, and one of our students has gone on to she's running the Monday, Friday morning training sessions for us from last season. We've got a couple of great students this year. So I've got a chap who comes in and provides, massage therapy to the boys at training sessions. And then I've got Dave, who's worked in football his life, who's an absolute godsend to have alongside me as well, a massive help. And then with regards to commitments around clinics, so, probably if I looked at it the other week, I reckon on average I'm probably 15 to 20 hours a week involved in football. And that's on top of kind of like a 40-hour week in clinic. So it's you have to manage your time quite well.
There's not only like you speaking about that, like I'm sitting here thinking not so much just time commitment, obviously that speaks for itself, but going through what you're responsible for and what you have to be in charge of. There's a lot of responsibility, isn't there? Like, is that something sometimes that you think a lot rests on your shoulders? Because it happens few and far between, but if there was to be a big accident or a big injury, you're the man that needs to run that operation.
Yeah, I think that you've just got to back your training, and we do scenarios a lot. We're like when the boys go out and train with the students, I always run through scenarios with them. So we're always continually practicing CPR, defib. We're practicing management of spinal injuries. We're practicing management of fractures. Obviously you don't ever want them to happen. You don't ever want one of your players or an opposite player or a fan to become ill or get a serious injury. But I think in the instance of if it ever does, you just got to, you've got the equipment, you've got the training, and I just think regularly practicing the scenarios makes it not easy, but you know that everyone knows their role.
Yeah.
I think if you don't do that, I think it's then when something happens, it's kind of like everyone's like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And
Panic stations.
But yeah, I think you just got to back I say that the training and the consistent CPD that you're always doing.
So you've touched on something really interesting there, Benno, and probably most people wouldn't realise this, but I suppose for every scenario, do you have like a plan in place for that? So will you have, for instance, as you say, CPR, this is the plan. So within your team, does everyone know their roles, and you have a plan in place for, I suppose, the 4 or 5 really, really bad injuries that could occur on match day?
Yeah, so we have an emergency action plan which we give to the away team and the referee as well, and they know where all of the equipment is within like medical equipment within our team. We have, depending on what students we've got on the day, we have set roles within the team. I'm linked up when I go on the pitch via radio to the bench, to my colleague, and in the event of anything serious, Dave would then bring on the trauma bag and equipment. But to be honest with you, doing the job and watching a hell of a lot on television as well. Whenever I can, I always watch the physio, always watch the injury. I never watch the ball. I think the most important part is that a lot of people, when they start working pitch side, is they follow the football. You've got to watch the challenge. And 9 times out of 10, if you watch the challenge, and Greg taught me this at Cambridge years and years ago, if you follow the challenge, you know what you're dealing before you get on the pitch. So I know from the sideline whether I haven't got to wait for the referee. If I know something serious has happened, I can pretty much 9 times out of 10 be correct, and I'm on the pitch before. And the ref will moan at me, and the fourth official will try and pull me back. But I've watched the mechanism. I've done it long enough. I know what's happened. Whereas some of the things, the lads will be like, Azar, he's down, and like, you kind of think, well, I know the player. There's nothing wrong with him. So it's about learning that as well.
To go, no way he's down.
Yeah, you've got to learn that as well. But very, the biggest thing I will say to the students is watch the tackle. Yeah. If you don't follow the ball, because I say 9 times out of 10, you'd have a player and touch it never happens. If a player has a non-contact collapse on the middle of the pitch, the first thing I'm going to grab is the defib and the bag and run on, regardless of what the referee says, because I've got to assume, he's by himself, there's no one around him, he's fallen over, there's something not quite right there.
I think that's a great point, and like you explaining it like that sort of reminds me of scouting. So when I've gone to do scouting, I think when you first go out, say, you've got to go and watch Arron Benstead at XYZ, you get in the habit of just following the ball, and then they'll say, how did Arron play? And you're a bit like, you have to just watch that person. As you say, you have to just watch that challenge. But you've taken one of my questions there. Obviously, it's become very popular. You see it on the TV, and the games I've seen at Chelmsford, the highlights I've watched this year, you've got your earpiece in. So talk to me about that process. You touched on it a little bit. So a player goes down, you're on, you've got the headset. Who has that other piece of that software, and what is the process?
Yeah, so either one of my colleagues, or if he's not at one of the games, just the students will have the earpiece on the bench, and then I will go on and I'll assess the player as quick as I can, because obviously you've got to make a decision quickly. So you kind of like you see the injury happen, you ask the player what's gone on, you look at the injury site, so it's my knee, I look at it, I'll touch it, feel around it, get them move in the area, and very quickly I will know, whether that player's going to stay on or come off. So I quickly will get on the radio and I'll say to, the bench, no problem, he's going to be carrying on, or it will be, no, we're going to have to bring him off. And then at that point, you kind of have to manage the situation a little bit, because if it's just something like a bit of an ankle sprain that they're okay to walk off, but you've got the referee in your ear saying, is he coming off? But you've got the bench in your ear saying, hold on, the sub's not ready. So you kind of have to work, you have to play the game a little bit and do a little bit of treatment on the player. Because the last thing we want is to bring a player off and be down to 10 men and be a centre half, say, and then the team's got corner. We want to make. And some referees are really good there. They'll actually say to you, "I'll slow down what you're doing," or make a walk down that way so you're longer on the pitch. Whereas others can be really rude to you and effectively are swearing at you to get off the pitch. And they're the ones you have to manage a little bit better and just smile at them.
So the other person on your team, they're communicating with the manager as if to say, this person's no good to go. It's a centre half. You've got XYZ on the bench. if they're not warming up, they need to quickly get warm, get their pads in, and then make a decision from there.
Yeah, the boys are quite good, and the manager's really good. If a player, say a centre half, a centre midfielder goes down, then the centre midfielder on the bench will make sure he's warmed up and ready to go. And then, say it's Dave on the bench, Dave will go to Simo and say, he's got to come off. And then obviously Simo will organise a sub. But yeah, we always try and make sure that the boys are aware what's going on. And if as I go on, I think probably that Dave as well will say to the particular lad, like, you need to get warm.
I always found it was interesting, like fines in football and non-league football. I've had it myself when I've been on the bench. What's the manager's rule around having your shirt on your pads in? Is that something that he's hot on, or?
Yeah, massively. So he want him to be ready to go, right? Yeah. So last thing is to make he's got to make a tactical decision, whether it's for an injury or tactics. And he turns around, the lad's like got his socks around his ankles, not got his shin pads done.
Boots are undone.
So he's always mentioned, particularly second half, that when they come out they need to be ready, because they, first half, unless it's an injury or forced sub, he's probably less expectant. If a player's down injured, then he wants them ready. But second half, they all know at half time they're getting ready to go.
I think that's the standard rule in it. If you've got a t-shirt on, make sure you've got your shirts on, your boots are on tight, your pads are in. So you've talked about the role and the team and how it's changed. Talk to me about like an evening sort of training session. What's your so I won't say the word day to day, but what's your sort of timetable for what time do the boys train? 7:30 is it on a Tuesday and Thursday?
Yeah, 8 till about 9:45.
Right, so say 8 till 10. What time are you there? What you're doing? What's the process for those training nights?
So we'll get there for about anything between 6:30 and 7. I always make sure we're there nice and early.
Yeah.
Any players that are potentially training but might have a little bit of a knock that they're carrying from the weekend, they're straight away assessed. We make a decision on them whether they're going to train or whether they're going to be we're going to take them in the gym for rehab. So we get them out the way first of all. Yeah. The longer term lads that have got more long based injuries, they then will assess them, see where they are.
Is that done while the boys are training, or you do that before as well?
So I try and do it before, and then what I'll try and do is it depends what we've got in, because then we have the youth team lads come in as well, and we have to see them, and sometimes that takes that I try and get the first team players done between 7 and 8, and then I like to take them in the gym, and I like to do it as a group, because I think that the worst thing for a player, particularly with a longer injury, is the mental is often worse than the physical. So if I've got them in the gym and just say, right, Christian, you get in the gym now, here's your plan, off you go by yourself, you're pretty quickly going to lose interest in it. So I try and get the boys in there together in the gym. I do their rehab with them as a group, and I often, if it's just one-on-one, if there's only one of them, we join in with them to make it a bit fun, so I'll train with the lad as well. So we kind of get them done, and then the boys go out and train, sort of 8 till 9:45. If I'm honest, you're always on tenterhooks when they're training, because you're often doing rehab, or I do some CPD with our students. Yeah. But I've always got the phone on me, because I always think if something goes on, then obviously they'll ring me, and I'm only literally a minute away from the training pitch. Yeah. Or the worst one is where you hear the studs coming in early, so you hear someone walking back, and you think, "Oh, what's going on?" Yeah.
So you're at Clarence Park. Like, what is the setup for training for Chelmsford? So do you report to the stadium, and there's a gym there?
Yeah, so we're really lucky. The setup's brilliant, because we go to the stadium. Opposite, obviously, the stadium, you've got where they're running, or in the ground, you've got the running track. And then the other side of the pitch, you've got a big gym. So we have, as part of being at the club, all the boys get free gym membership. Okay. So a lot of the lads will come in before. So the injured boys will come in. The ones that aren't injured will come in about 7 o'clock. Yeah. And they'll often go to the gym and have a workout and bits and bobs before training. So it's a brilliant, facility to have. We've got an indoor running track that's probably about 80 metres long. So we use that for, if I can, for a bit of rehab. Brilliant. They've got sand pits, they've got crash mats. So when got lads coming back from, lower limb injuries, we do a lot of landing work. So, in sand, on crash mats, etc. So the facilities they got there are great. And then next door to that, they've got a full size 3G pitch. Okay. So it's all within like about a minute of each other.
And if a player's injured, is there a time commitment they have to be in by? Is it stipulated by you or the manager that what time they need to be there?
Yeah, so I'll often say to the boys, if it's an ongoing injury and we know they're out for a period of time, they might say to me, what time do I need to be there for tonight? And it'll just be like coming at normal time. If it's like the players that we're unsure whether they're going to train, or we've got to do a little bit of like pre-work to test they can train, I'll often get them to come in a little bit earlier just so I can get them out the way and get a decision made. And because obviously, as soon as the manager comes in, kind of I want to let him know who's training, who's not. And ideally, I try and do it before. So I'll often, if we picked up a knock on a Saturday, you know, and it's something which I'm not too concerned about. I might get the lads to do something on the Monday or the Tuesday morning, just say, you know, let me know how it feels. If he comes back to me and says, oh, no, it's not quite right.
So you know he's not training.
Yeah, right? I'll message the manager in the day and just say, look, you know, tonight you'll have X and Y out of training, because obviously then he can plan his sessions as well around it.
And you touched on something there about the boys coming to the gym. I'm probably not the best person to ask, because anything to do with the gym, I used to hide in the toilet or mess around with a speaker. But is it called prehab? And talk me through it, because again, that's how the whole, like your sort of department and physio and strength, that the whole world's changed, right? So, you know, obviously you see the full-time teams do it, but talk to me about, so the boys going to the gym is called prehab. What are they doing in them sessions before training?
So I think prehab, like preventative rehabilitation, it's one of them things I look at it, and we can't prevent injuries. So no matter what you do, the research shows us that you're not going to stop injuries, but you can minimise the risk of them. So if you look at things like the FIFA 11 Plus, which is used worldwide, and something which is done by FIFA, there's some great studies looking at adolescents and adults, male and female football, and it has reduced the amount of injuries by quite a large amount.
What's that called for any listeners?
The FIFA 11 Plus.
FIFA 11 Plus.
Yeah, you can Google it and you can download the PDF for free. It's just some simple exercises which you can do anywhere. And I think, you know, even like my boys team, for example, I get the boys to do bits. You know, if we can reduce the risk of injury, then you know we're already getting ahead of the curve, but we're never going to stop injury. So you know, our boys in pre-season, we did a lot of pre-season testing with them, where I looked at any imbalances they've got, lack of strength or any compensations, and then we give them rehab plans that they go into the gym and they're getting on with, because we want to, you know, if we can identify the injury early before it happens, we can put an intervention in place to stop it happening. And because the biggest I suppose commodity to any semi-professional football team is the injured footballer. Because they're being paid and they can't play. You know, the lads will be in the gym doing some core work. They might, you know, be doing some like, if they've got recurring or a history of hamstring injuries, they might probably be doing some hamstring and glute strengthening work. If they're, you know, suffered with ankle injuries in the past, they'll be doing some balance work, some strength around the ankle. So yeah, we try and tailor it specifically to the boys, but those ones will kind of go in the gym and get on with it. Some of them will use it as like on the Monday morning sessions, might use it as a recovery as well. So they might jump in there early, get on the bike, get the legs ticking over. And again, on a Tuesday, Thursday, some of the lads will go in, you know, jump on the bike 20 minutes, get the legs ticking over, have a bit of a stretch and a roll, and then come in and they're good to go out and train.
Boys buy into that, would you say?
I think the prehab side of it, I'll be honest.
Is that the newer school or the younger?
I think when you're trying to do it in a club, particularly around training, you're limited on the time that the manager's got with the team. So I always think that the prehab, particularly in part-time football, seems a little bit of a chore if you're doing it on the pitch, because the gaffer's looking at it and thinking, well, that's 10 minutes, I could be doing a session on how to beat the team at the weekend.
Yeah, you lost time on the ball, didn't you?
Yeah, and I also think it becomes a bit boring for the boys. So if they can use a gym, because then you're limited to what you can do about equipment, right? But if they can get in the gym and they've got actually, you know, something that they, you know, it's a bit warmer as well, it's a bit nicer, I think that most of the boys do buy into it, yeah.
Is there a pool there as well? Is there access to a pool at the gym?
We haven't got a pool at the gym, no. They have ice baths at the club, but that's about all they're getting.
So that's training, and then we'll obviously away day speaks for itself. You know, there's some big trips in that conference south. But so for a 3 o'clock kickoff at home, what's your plan around that?
So I normally arrive at 11, and I'll go in the gym first of all. And if I've got, you know, and train myself. If I've got any lads that again are on long-term injuries, I'll get them to meet me and I'll go in the gym with them, so we make it like a bit of fun for them, and then come 1 o'clock, all the boys are in for the game. You know, we'll start doing strap-ins from 1 o'clock. I'd rather kind of be rushed between 1 and 1:45 and get all the strap-ins, the pre-game massages done. You know, go and set up the warm, make sure all of like the medical equipment's, you know, everything's working, that the defib's working, that the gases are full. All of our pitch side equipment's there, so we sort of organise all that side of it. And then most times, you know, obviously I go out and do the warm up as well. So I take the team warm up and
what you take that before. So what you take Do you take that part of it before they get on the balls then? So the initial 10, 15 minute warm up, that's you, is it?
Yeah, so I do all the pre-activation work and
Okay.
getting the heart rate up, and just getting the lads prepped before their ball work.
Yeah.
That kind of takes me up normally till about 25 past 2. And then if I've got any players that are at end stage rehab, so they're multi-directional moving, they're doing some ball work, I will take them then for 20 minutes myself, and then do a little bit with them. So yeah, pretty much the busiest part is between 1 and quarter to 2 o'clock time. Because that's where I'm having to do a lot more, and you've got players coming in and lads are queuing up at the door to have bits done. And then come 3 o'clock, sometimes, which you like to would be all the time, you can sit there and not move for 90 minutes.
Yeah. So you touched on a few things there. One, you talked about you go through all your jobs. Do you have like a checklist on a game day to, you've got to check the gas, you've got to check this. Is that something, or is that something more that you know what you've got to do and just mentally you're just going through it?
I think mentally, I don't have a physical check, but mentally, because I've done it for, say, a long time now, I'll go through it. And then the only other thing I do additionally around that is I meet the opposite team's physio.
Okay.
Just to go through introduce myself, meet them,
compare strappings,
chat. Yeah. But it's also like, if they've got, for example, that sometimes there might only be us two there.
Sure.
So,
okay.
To say to them, look, in the event, have you seen the emergency action plan? Have you seen, this is where all the emergency equipment is, this is the ambulance access. And sometimes if, for example, like 2 of their players have a clash of heads, then naturally I'd go on and assist them and help them with their other player, because they can only treat one at a time and vice versa. So I think it's really, some clubs you go to, the physios don't want to talk to you, and I think that someone's that we're doing the same job. So I think it's important. I always make sure that either before the game or before the game, literally as it kicks off, I always go and find the away team physio just to speak to them and just make sure that they're okay and they know everything is in the event of emergency.
In your role, it don't really make, obviously sometimes a bit of needle between players and whatnot, but you'd think in your role everyone wants to be everyone's friend, because you never know when you're going to need each other, right? And as you say, if there's only one person, surely you want to know the plan, you want to know, you've got some kind of working relationship there. Would you say physios at your level, they're sort of like your experience level, or again, is it sometimes younger people trying to make their way into the full-time game?
I think a lot of it is like when they don't necessarily maybe won't come and find you. I think a lot of it's probably down to confidence, because they are quite young. And I think that, and if I'm honest, I probably think that a lot of clubs have got quite young therapists because of notoriously medical staff are paid poorly in football. You've got a few of the clubs who have had the same physios for years, and you get to know them, and you'll have a beer with them after the game and what have you. But a lot of them change year on year. There's a high turnover of medical staff in non-league football. And I'd say a lot of them are fairly young.
And is that because, we spoke to it before, you can get the placements from uni and stuff? Is that the club still leaning on that massively rather than having their own physio?
Yeah, so legally you can't have a student do your medicals, because the student needs to have supervision. And they need to have the FA are very strict on the level of trauma qualification that you have at the level. So basically that, the league, national league, and has to have the same pitch side qualification as the Premier League physios, whereas the national self has the one slightly like the intermediate qualification. So clubs shouldn't have students running the bag. But that's because they need to be supervised, and I say that they do need to have a particular level of qualification. Some may have, but most of the ones that we've come across do have their own therapist, and they may have a student with them as well.
The younger ones, is it like football? Are the younger ones wanting to get on in the football world?
I think a lot of them do. I think a lot of them, from speaking to them, run. Whereas I obviously run my clinic full time and work in football on the side of it. Whereas a lot of them have other jobs. They haven't. Maybe they've not. For whatever reason, they've not gone into full-time sport. They've not have built up a full-time clinic. That they might have an admin job, but they kind of love what they did their degree in, and then they're trying to develop themselves and maybe doing part-time work, part-time clinic, and then part-time football. And but I think a lot of them have got the aspirations to go on and work at better levels.
The only other question I've got from your match day routine is, obviously it's become very fashionable now. I call them the elastic bands. Obviously you now see anyone from a Premier League team, I see teams in like Ryman North and whatever using them. So tell me about when the boys first go out, do you use the midi bands?
Yeah, we do, but they hate them. We've got the tightest minivans in the world. They are they're really tight. But
So anyone that don't know, what is that? Why are they doing that? What exercises are you doing?
So it's basically like pre-activation. So you're kind of doing movements to kind of get muscles working slightly before you go on and you're warming up the muscles that they're using running. So most it's lower body. Interestingly, though, a lot of people will prescribe those exercises, strength-based exercises.
Okay.
But like, for example, like the one that you've seen when they put it around their ankles and they walk in a side movement.
Yeah.
It's only actually using about 30% of your glute muscles, which a lot of people think it's all glute. So it's a really low-level movement. But I think, it's just to prime the muscle as such, to switch it on a little bit, to get a little bit of blood flowing through it. And then when the lads go into their, again, even with the warm-up, that we don't go into straight sprint, we build them in, we start really low and we build the pace. But essentially, it's just to kind of pre-warm those muscles.
Okay, and as we, I suppose, look to wrap this up, what in that obviously you've got all that other equipment, you've got all that other sort of things that you can use, but in your run-on bag, what would be in that bag?
So on the run-on bag, so I always have this discussion with people that the bag you run on with, you really probably only use a couple of things in it.
Because some I see look like a suitcase, some look like they've got a tiny little bum bag. Like what's the difference? Yeah,
so in my bag that I run on with, I've got gauzes, I've got nose plugs for bleeds and noses. I've got sugar, believe it or not, because the easiest way to seal up a bleeding mouth inside is give them a sugar cube to suck on. I've got all different strap-ins. We've got like a CPR mask in there. You've got airways for the unconscious athlete who can't maintain their own airway. But in reality, you've got obviously your sprays and whatever. So in reality, you probably could run on with a bum bag. You could have a gauze, you could have a bit of Vaseline, and you could probably have a bit of cold spray, and that would suit the management of most injuries. But it'll be the time when you run on, you've only got them three things, so you're like, you need when there's something else going on.
So you have a full bag. You don't have anything else on the bench. Obviously, there's the serious injuries. You've got to go and get other stuff. But the bag that you run on with, primarily everything that you need will be in that bag.
Yeah, everything's in that. And then we have a backup bag on the bench. So let's say like wound glue, for example. If I've got a player who's split their head open and I think I can glue it there and then, I'll clean it with some saline spray and I will actually glue them on the pitch. Because again, what I don't want to do is bring the player off, have to glue them, then strap them up because it's time loss. If I can get away with it on the pitch, but then when I go back to the bench, I'll take the spare glue out and put that in my bag. So we have a sort of like a backup bag that kind of replenishes the main bag.
So just to you touched on it earlier, strength and conditioning and physios. Obviously, they're different departments, but they obviously work in a full-time environment, work very closely together. Yeah.
Yeah, in full-time sport, the crossover between them, normally, naturally, the physio's going to do the assessment and what have you.
Yeah.
And then you're going to say to the S&C coach that this is what they need to be doing. But collectively as a group, you'll look at sort of you'll look at the key parameters of what's required for a player in certain positions. And in pro football, you'll have baseline testing to where they were, and you've got to get them back to. So, once they're out of that acute injury phase, you're going to give them to the S&C coach, and the S&C coach will do a lot of their, strength and conditioning based programming, their balance work, their getting them out on the pitch. But in a lot of clubs as well, the physio and the S&C department will work in unison. In non-league football, you have to have the knowledge of both because we haven't got the luxury of having a physio and an S&C coach. So, around like just general practice, I am a qualified S&C coach as well, and it's just having that ability to, I suppose, understand the injury, but also be able to understand how I can get that player from being out for 6 months back to playing football at that level, and having that S&C knowledge is huge in that.
So, last couple of questions. How would you say, Benno, physio? We touched on so much stuff, and you've given me so much information, and for the listeners as well. But how would you say your role has changed from the football 6-7 years ago to now? Like what has changed?
I think the level of qualification has definitely changed. Right. Beforehand, pretty much as long as you got a basic first aid qualification, you could run the bag. And I think that, and again, a lot of physios are seen as massage therapists as well. And there's a big difference between that. So I think the understanding of what the role is has hugely changed. I think the players hugely changed, if I'm honest with you. I think that 7 years ago, you'd have players that would, and whether it's a good or bad thing, but wouldn't ever come and see you for anything. Whereas now you'll have players will come and see you for the most minor things, and you kind of look at it and think, I wouldn't, when I was playing, I wouldn't have even gone to the physio.
You've just taken my last. You've taken my last question, Benno. So expand on that, because I look at players now and I just think they're all big wet sponges. Like, because as you say, you wanted to play, and I think mentality wise, I think you realise once you're playing non-league football, you might only be 70% these days, and you've got to play with an injury, and you've got to tape it up, strap it up, suck it up, whatever. But I see a lot of boys now. He's injured, but he played the next week. Like, what? Just to what you were saying, like, boy, is it just society thing, or is it because the game's getting younger, like, and the old school have sort of moved on and retired? Why is that?
I don't know. I think probably
is it a mental thing.
I think a mentality thing. I do think that there's that whole notion of years. You want, don't get me wrong, you want every player to run through a brick wall for you, right? Every fan, every manager, you want your players to run through anything to put the ball in the back of the net or stop the ball going in the back of yours.
Yeah.
But you will have those players nowadays say, well, like player gets a bruised foot. They want, they can't train for a week, and you kind of think, well, as much as a bruised foot is dependent on the severity of it, obviously, but some of it I look at it and think, you could go out and train with that, and why they. I don't know. I've been at some clubs where you look outside, it's raining, it's freezing cold, everyone's got a hamstring, but obviously you have to sift through the ones which are genuinely injured and the ones that aren't, and you kind of say to them, no, you know what, you're all right, you can get out. Yeah. But I also think that maybe sometimes it's that, you don't know when a player comes into training and has got a little bit of a niggle. Yeah. As much I wouldn't ever dismiss it, because you don't know what's happened in their the day before, and sometimes all they want to have a chat, and sometimes just have a bit of attention or a bit of TLC. Yeah, I also think is huge, but I think, I'm going back to your question, I probably think mentality is a big thing. I'm not saying it's fashionable to be injured, because it isn't. You do end up having I think if people want a lot more passive intervention, so they want you to do things, they want to feel like they've had a rub and all the rest of it. Whereas actually they'd get absolutely more if they went out and did an active movement to get their muscles looser.
But you touched on a good point there. Physio sometimes has to be there. You have to be their mate, right? You have to be their buddy, confidant. Sometimes, as I say, they don't just need an arm around a shoulder. Do you also think it a little bit, Benno, where obviously there's a huge amount of money in football and it's stripped down the levels? Like, where, say, a Conference South team now, where maybe at Chelmsford a lot of the boys are on contract, is there a change in mentality where we're going to get paid whatever as well? Do you think there's a little bit of lack of hunger as well, where back in the day there was a lot of non-league clubs that didn't play, you weren't on the bench, didn't get your money, right? Yeah. So is that a thing, you think, or?
No, I think that I've seen it in the past. I think if our group of boys, I think the club recruit really well. I'll be honest with you, they don't sign sort of any bad eggs that would just sit on their money. I'd like to not think, and I think they'd like not to think that. I don't think any player, I think a lot of them, because they're so young, want to aspire to become better. Yeah. I think that, they don't want to be injured. So no, I think that paying players when they're injured because they got injured playing for the club, I think that they should be paid.
Of course. 100%.
And I also think that, if they need things like consultant referrals, MRI scans, that sort. So I also think that should be part of, the club should have insurances for that. Yeah. I don't think, certainly at our club, it's not a case of that. We haven't got any lads that would kind of think, oh, you know what, I've injured this week, or I'm going to be out for 6 weeks, but it's all right, I still get my money. Yeah. I think they all, any of the ones we've had that have been longer term, we've had a few already this year, a couple that, one particularly that season's already pretty much going to be done, and he's straight away, he just wants to be back, and for him, it's a long journey ahead of him, and it's a long mental battle ahead of him. But he like literally straight away is like, I want to run now, and you know he can't. Yeah. I don't think that's the case at our club.
But and then lastly, Benno, you touched on a bit. I'm sure at that level there's a lot of insurances in place for the players, right? Is that correct at Chelmsford?
So the club don't actually have anything as such for the players at the minute, but it's something we're looking into changing. A lot of players can get, particularly if they're the self-employed boys, for like £20 a month.
That's what I was going to ask. So is that something obviously that you would?
I would push every player, whether you're playing park football on a weekend or you're playing football around your let's be honest, some of these lads are earning good money
Yeah.
around part-time football. For £20, £25 a month,
Yeah.
I would 100% have an insurance that if something like a broken leg gets you, anything like about an £8,000 payout,
Yeah.
and then 1,500 to 2,000 a month, up to 18 months.
Yeah.
And I just think that for the sake of maybe not even for what some lads is on, less than 10% of their monthly wage,
Yeah.
well less than that. Sorry, their weekly wage. They can get something in place that they know covers them in the event of a longer term injury.
Okay, and I'll touch base with you after. Maybe I can make some suggestions on my podcast if you know anyone that are offering them services.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then lastly, mate, just give us a plug for this place here. What's the name? Where can you find it? What your socials, etc.
So yeah, we're Back to Best's Injury and Rehab Clinic based in Southend. On Instagram and Facebook as B2B Injury Clinic. We if you've got any injuries, any pain, you don't have to be a sports person. We treat a wide range of people. We're fortunate that we're sort of at the minute treating around 80 to 100 patients per week every week. But if you need any help with any type of injury, be it sport or non-sport related, just drop us a shout, drop me a message, and I'll be more than happy to help.
Mate, that's excellent. I've learned a lot today. I hope the listeners have learned a lot, and I really appreciate you giving up your time on a busy Monday morning.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you, mate.